All right. So Bianca Devins, she was this up-and-coming personality on Instagram, and believe me, she was really starting to build a serious following online. She had a lot of friends and fans she connected with through social media, but there was this one friend who turned out to be interested in Bianca in a way that nobody else really saw. On the surface, it looked like Bianca and this guy were close, that they cared for each other and were always together. But investigators were about to find out he was after something else entirely, a motive so dark that no detective could have predicted it. One that would steal Bianca's life and result in a crime scene that was just unbelievably twisted. Now, Bianca Devins had a term she used for herself, a fake internet girl. And while she had gathered a pretty big online audience, Bianca was also a very real human being, which is something I think we all tend to forget when we follow our favorite social media stars. From all accounts, Bianca was really trying to build a career as a social media influencer, and she was well on her way to actually achieving that dream. I can't tell you exactly how many followers she had at the time, but her account right now has just under 150,000, and I'm sure a huge number of those came after this all happened. But we'll get to that. For a 17-year-old, Bianca seemed to have her head screwed on straight. She was a seriously talented artist, a fact that comes through loud and clear in so many of her more artistic Instagram posts. And Bianca wasn't an e-girl in the way most people think of the term. She wasn't posting provocative pictures like you see so often these days. Instead, her photos were more like artistic shots. She'd often pair images of herself with captions or other pictures, turning her posts into a kind of modern art. But even with her heavy focus on a potential online career, she was also taking practical steps to build a successful life in case the whole social media thing didn't work out. Bianca was an exceptionally smart young woman. Her family said she was truly proud of how she tried to help other people. An old online friend even remembered that about her, that Bianca was always there for the people around her, even when she herself was dealing with some incredibly dark personal stuff. Bianca had already made plans for college. She was going to study psychology at Mohawk Valley College in Utica, New York. It doesn't seem like she'd locked in what she wanted to do with her degree, but you have to imagine it would have involved counseling or some form of therapy. But we'll never know for sure. But here's the thing. While Bianca projected this image of a strong, determined young woman online, she was dealing with some incredibly serious issues that were a part of her life every single day for years. Look, we all know being a teenager can be hell, and so many teens have to fight through depression at some point. But what Bianca was facing, it was on another level from what most of us have ever had to experience. Her family talked about her teenage years and shared that Bianca had been fighting these intense waves of depression for a long, long time. And it wasn't just that she was also coping with severe anxiety and had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Now, listen, I am not an expert on BPD, so I'm not even going to attempt to break down the disorder. But I know that it's something a huge number of people struggle with, especially teenagers. The one thing I do know about BPD is that it can create a profoundly distorted sense of reality and make emotions feel intensely magnified. And some studies say that as many as 10% of people with BPD end up taking their own lives before finding treatment that works for them. God. As if that wasn't enough to carry, Bianca was also being treated for PTSD, though the exact cause of all these issues isn't publicly known. Her loved ones explained that because of this constant battle, she spent much of her teenage life moving in and out of mental health facilities. Bianca was in a really tough spot, and she fought as hard as she could to manage her health. But sometimes she'd lose a battle and have to go back to the hospital for more treatment. So when you consider all the things she was dealing with in her day-to-day life, it's not surprising at all that Bianca looked for a safe haven in online communities, especially places like 4chan and Discord. I mean, can you blame her? So many of these forums she joined were built on the idea of anonymity, which meant Bianca could be anyone she wanted. She could exist without the constant judgment she faced over her daily struggles. And online, Bianca made a ton of friends, but she also made some enemies. A newspaper article I found mentioned that even though the internet was Bianca's sanctuary, it wasn't always safe. She was apparently harassed by some truly perverted men more than once. And these guys would reportedly go to incredible lengths to try and manipulate Bianca into doing, well, whatever it was they were after. You just never know what you're dealing with when it comes to some of the creeps online. I mean, for all we know, they could have been pestering her for pictures of her armpits or something like that. I say that half joking, but in all seriousness, if you have kids who are teenagers, you absolutely have to monitor who they're talking to online. One conversation can lead to a dangerous situation in a heartbeat. And Bianca was about to learn that lesson in the worst way imaginable. One of the individuals Bianca had been in contact with online was a guy who went by Brandon Clark. Brandon, it turns out, had a pretty difficult past himself. Now, the specific details of his childhood and how he was raised aren't really public, but we are aware that he, much like Bianca, had to process a lot of trauma when he was younger. He once talked about an incident where he watched his own father hold his mother hostage with a weapon for several hours. Thankfully, that situation seems to have de-escalated, but witnessing that as a child did a great deal of psychological damage to Brandon. As he got older, Brandon was able to function, but he always carried these triggers and inner troubles that could send him into fits of paranoia, rage, or worse. So even though he managed to live a normal-looking life, he'd been battling his own demons for as long as he could remember. And that shared history of trauma is probably what allowed him and Bianca to connect so deeply. The general belief is that Bianca and Brandon met on Instagram, probably sometime in the spring of 2019. He'd started following her because he was into her posts, but he quickly moved to messaging her privately. Bianca must have thought he seemed like a perfectly decent guy because she actually wrote him back. Before long, their online chats evolved into a real-life friendship, but that's where the problem really started. See, at the time, Bianca was just 17 years old, while Brandon was 21. That age difference didn't seem to matter to Brandon, though. While he enjoyed being friends with Bianca, for him, that simply wasn't going to be enough. And while their relationship wasn't illegal, strictly speaking, the age of consent in New York is 17, it certainly raised a few eyebrows. Brandon apparently made his romantic feelings for Bianca known multiple times, but Bianca always shut him down right away, making it clear she wasn't interested in anything beyond their friendship. She felt they had a lot in common and that they both got a lot of value out of being friends, but Brandon, he just couldn't seem to let it go. But this is where the facts of their relationship get a bit murky. According to investigators, they have evidence that suggests Bianca was, and this is their exact phrasing, personally intimate with Brandon. Now, what that actually means is anybody's guess, but to me, it sounds like they had reason to believe the relationship was consensual and physical. I could be wrong about that, but that's the clear implication as far as I can tell. Bianca's mother, on the other hand, completely rejects these claims. She says that she and Bianca had spoken about Brandon on several occasions, and Bianca had promised her that their relationship was nothing more than a friendship. But let's be honest for a moment. If you were 17 and you were involved with someone who was 21, would you really tell your parents? Now, look, I don't have any idea about the dynamic between Bianca and her mother, and I am absolutely not suggesting Bianca was lying to her mom. I don't know this family at all. My only point here is that it is entirely plausible that her mother wasn't aware of the full nature of what was going on. Now, I might seem completely out of line to even suggest such a thing, considering Bianca was technically a minor. But the reason I've arrived at the conclusion that Bianca might not have been telling her mother everything is because a close friend of Bianca's mother alleges that she was afraid Brandon was manipulating Bianca. This friend claims that Brandon would get Bianca high and then coerce her into sexual encounters. So, if this family friend had reasons to believe they were intimately involved and detectives are claiming the same thing, well, it doesn't seem like too much of a stretch to assume that they were. But we still have to classify that idea as a rumor because it can't be proven. Here's the real takeaway, though. In all honesty, regardless of the specific details of Bianca's relationship with Brandon, one thing is certain, she was not interested in him when it came to a serious or even a long-term relationship. They might have been a bit more than just friends, but she had no intention of things ever going further than that. The problem was Brandon was a very jealous man, and Bianca was a young girl who turned a lot of heads. And unfortunately, this dynamic was about to cause a dramatic implosion in their relationship, one that Bianca wouldn't survive. It was July of 2019. For the previous couple of weeks, Bianca had been talking with her mother about going to a concert in Queens. A gothic folk singer Bianca was a massive fan of was playing a show, and Bianca wanted to be there more than anything in the world. Bianca's mother was extremely hesitant to let her daughter go to a concert alone, but her worries eased a bit when she found out Brandon was going to be there as well. Bianca's mother really liked Brandon. She thought he seemed like a very respectable young man, and she felt much better about Bianca going to the show after learning he would be with her. Now, to be clear, her mom still didn't want her to go, but in her own words, Bianca was almost 18 and she knew her daughter was going to go with or without her permission. When the night of the show finally came, Bianca was buzzing with excitement. She spent most of the evening trying on different outfits and asking her mom for feedback. She finally landed on a black tank top with a black and white skirt. It was around then that Bianca's mother found out another person would be joining them, a young man named Alex, who Bianca had met on Discord. We don't have Alex's age, but we know he lived somewhere nearby, and Bianca thought the concert would be a perfect opportunity for them to meet for the first time. Bianca eventually left her house with Brandon, and they met up with Alex a short time later. Based on various reports from that night, it really seems like Bianca was romantically interested in Alex, even though she had told her mother she wanted to stay single so she wouldn't be tied down when she left for college in a few months. But for whatever reason, it seems Bianca was completely captivated by Alex. The two of them had so much in common, and Alex was an incredibly sweet and caring person. They had already talked for countless hours online about literally everything. In Bianca's mind, it felt like they had been friends for years, even though, as far as I can tell, they had only known each other for a matter of weeks. This connection only deepened and got stronger once they were together in person. Bianca seems to have been falling head over heels for Alex, and the two of them eventually kissed at a store near the venue in Queens. As you can probably imagine, this sent Brandon into a fury. Brandon, being the possessive type, felt utterly betrayed by Bianca. From Brandon's point of view, Bianca had just told him she wasn't interested in anything serious, and then in his mind, she immediately turned around and started pursuing someone else. To say Brandon was devastated would be an understatement. Bianca tried to tell him that it was just a friendly kiss and nothing more, but Brandon was convinced that something deeper was going on. Somehow it seems the three of them still went to the concert together anyway, but you can be sure that Brandon kept a much closer watch on Bianca after that. Bianca had been keeping in touch with her mother all night, and the final text her mom received came through at around 7:30 p.m., when the three of them were trying to find a parking spot for the show. After that message, her mother heard nothing. When her mom still hadn't heard from them by around 1:45 the next morning, she started to get a little worried. But she figured that Brandon and Bianca had probably just pulled over somewhere to get some sleep instead of trying to drive all the way home in the dark. Unfortunately, that wasn't what happened at all. By 7 a.m. that morning, Bianca's sister Olivia heard a knock on their door. She went to answer it and was completely shocked to see police officers standing there. And they needed to talk to her about Bianca. When prosecutors showed up at Bianca's house, it wasn't because she was in some kind of trouble or had been arrested. No, they were there to deliver the absolute worst news any parent could ever hear. Bianca's life had been taken from her. And as if that wasn't horrific enough, it was taken by someone the family trusted. That calm and collected person Brandon pretended to be. It was a total act. He wasn't that person at all. After the concert was over, the two of them argued for hours about Bianca's kiss with Alex. While Bianca saw it as just a simple misunderstanding, Brandon took it as a deep personal betrayal of his trust, and he was not going to let it go. Brandon genuinely seemed to believe that he loved Bianca and he probably would have done anything to make her love him back, but his thinking was, if he couldn't have Bianca, then nobody could. As the two of them were in the middle of this massive fight inside Brandon's car, Brandon pulled out a knife that he'd hidden in the vehicle earlier. And in a single swift motion, he ended Bianca's life. For reasons that are still not totally clear, Brandon seems to have been operating under the assumption or the delusion that he and Bianca were actually dating, even though she had supposedly made it painfully clear that she wasn't interested. We know this was his mindset because Brandon actually called the police on himself and confessed. But instead of saying he had just killed his best friend, he called 911 and told them he had just killed his girlfriend. But this is where the story gets profoundly disturbing, confusing, and just dark. On that horrible night, Brandon didn't just reveal that he was battling serious issues. He showed the world that he was a truly sick and disturbed individual. Before he even bothered to dial 911, Brandon had actually taken pictures with Bianca's body. He posed with her, and then he shared those images all over social media. And if that wasn't awful enough, the photos spread like wildfire. But somehow, it gets even worse. Because Bianca was an emerging Instagram personality, those photos eventually found their way onto Instagram, and soon enough, the pictures were being sent directly to the inboxes of Bianca's own family members. Her mother received these images multiple times, and she opened the messages before she even had a chance to realize what she was looking at, blindsiding her with the most horrific pictures of her child that anyone could ever imagine. The images were sent with cruel and false captions, with some users claiming Bianca deserved what happened to her. Some even said she was sleeping around and had it coming, which was a complete and utter lie. When detectives dug deeper into what happened, they found that Brandon had first posted the images to a Discord server that Bianca used all the time. He posted the picture with a profanity-filled comment, basically telling her fans they'd have to find someone new to follow now that Bianca was gone. Investigators have even suggested that Brandon might have filmed himself committing the murder, and there are rumors that this video is also out there somewhere on the internet. But to be perfectly honest, that's not an allegation I'm willing to research myself, because some things are better left unseen. So if you're curious about whether those claims are true, I'm going to have to let you do that digging on your own. When the police arrived at the crime scene, after Brandon's phone call and confession, he actually turned the knife on himself and tried to end his own life. But thankfully, first responders got there in time and were able to give him medical aid and keep him alive long enough to face a trial. In the end, Brandon made a full recovery. Investigators said they have every reason to believe that Brandon didn't just kill Bianca out of jealousy. They think he also did it for the attention. They found a note at the scene, written by Brandon, that said, "May you never forget me." Worse still, the murder may have been planned all along, and that kiss might not have been the real trigger at all. He may have intended to do this from the very beginning. Police stated they have more than enough evidence to suggest Brandon had been planning this for quite some time. If you remember, the knife Brandon used to commit the murder had been stashed in his car ahead of time, presumably long before Bianca ever kissed Alex. Brandon had also spent several days Googling things like the location of the carotid artery, as well as how to incapacitate a person. By all accounts, it seems like Brandon had every intention of taking Bianca's life for weeks beforehand. But in the end, he was only sentenced for second-degree murder, likely due to a lack of absolutely irrefutable evidence for a first-degree charge. Thankfully, Brandon was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. But if we're being honest, I think we all know that man is never going to see the light of day again. In the aftermath of the murder, the crime scene photos of Bianca were popping up everywhere online. Her family had to endure not only the tragic, heartbreaking loss of their child, but every time they opened social media, they were confronted with more of these horrific images. One of Bianca's friends remembered a time when someone forwarded the photo to her. The friend immediately flagged the picture and reported it to Instagram to get it removed. But get this. She received a message back from Instagram the very next morning saying that the image did not violate their terms of service and therefore it would not be taken down. And this wasn't a one-off event. According to some of Bianca's family members, they kept receiving these horrific images in their inboxes for more than 2 years after Bianca's life was taken. With her family feeling completely helpless to stop the spread of these disturbing photos, Bianca's fans came up with a different approach. Her followers all organized and worked together to start sharing pictures of pink clouds in Bianca's honor. The strategy, it seems, was to try and bury the graphic crime scene photos with images of peaceful, beautiful clouds. And this movement did manage to make a difference, at least to some extent. For Bianca's family, though, the damage was already done. Bianca's mother says that she feels like she can't even close her eyes without seeing those awful, disgusting final images of her daughter. And then, to make things even worse, she discovered that the Oneida District Attorney's Office had also leaked private photos and videos of Bianca to the press. So now those videos are circulating online as well. These images supposedly came directly from Bianca's personal phone. When investigators and detectives were searching the phone as part of the investigation, the images were uploaded to a database that was shared between multiple law enforcement agencies. And from there, they were somehow leaked to the public. Without going into a lot of detail, all I can really say is that these photos and videos are, well, they're extremely disturbing, and they're also highly illegal because Bianca was underage. That should tell you everything you need to know. Bianca's family has since filed a lawsuit over the leaks, but as of right now, that case is still ongoing. This whole story is just disgusting from beginning to end. From Bianca's struggles with her mental health, to what her close friend did to her, and then to the complete mishandling of her case by the district attorney's office. Every single aspect of this is just tragic. Bianca's family will likely be fighting legal battles for many years to come, but maybe, on some level, knowing that Brandon is incarcerated will bring them some small measure of peace. Knowing that the man who destroyed their lives will now be locked away forever. At his trial, Brandon definitely showed what looks like remorse, but whether those feelings were real or just an act for the court is impossible to say. All we can hope for now is that Brandon never ever gets to live as a free person again. So when you really step back and look at this whole thing, the story of Bianca Devins, it's a difficult one to process. And it leaves you with this heavy question: how does something like this even happen? What was the key factor that pushed the situation over the edge into such a horrifying tragedy? Honestly, it wasn't just one single thing you can point to. It was more like a perfect storm of modern dangers, hidden struggles, and one person's inability to face rejection. The absolute core of this tragedy, without a doubt, was Brandon's obsession and his deep-seated issues. Here was a young man who, like Bianca, was dealing with his own past trauma. But instead of processing it in a healthy way, he let it fester into this dark possessiveness. He built up this fantasy in his head where he and Bianca were meant to be something more, and he simply could not handle the reality that she didn't feel the same way. He couldn't accept the word no. And that right there, that refusal to accept rejection, was the trigger. It wasn't just about the kiss with Alex. That was just the final excuse. The real problem was his belief that he was somehow entitled to Bianca's affection, and if he couldn't have it, his only response was rage and destruction. But you also have to look at the role the internet played in all of this. It's this strange, intense world where you can feel closer to someone you've only ever typed to than people you see every day. Bianca and Brandon's entire relationship was born and amplified online. That intensity can be misleading. It can feel like genuine intimacy, like you truly know someone when in reality you only know the version of them they choose to show you. It's an environment where red flags can be easily hidden or dismissed. Brandon's obsessive nature might have seemed like he was just being really attentive online. His jealousy could have been brushed off as him just caring a lot. The lines get so blurry, and it's incredibly difficult to judge a person's true character through a screen. So, what's the moral here? What can we possibly take away from such a senseless loss of life that might, just might, prevent it from happening again? It's complicated, but there are some hard truths we have to face. First, and this is the most important one, you have to trust your gut. We teach people to be polite, to not make a scene, to give others the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes that little voice in the back of your head that says something's not right here is the only thing that matters. If someone's attention feels less like affection and more like surveillance, if they get angry or manipulative when you want space, that is not love. That is a warning. Bianca told him she just wanted to be friends. She set a boundary. His inability to respect that boundary was the biggest red flag of all. Let's be clear. How someone handles rejection, it tells you everything you need to know about their character. A healthy person will be disappointed, maybe even hurt, but they will respect your decision and move on. A dangerous person will see it as an insult, a challenge. They'll try to guilt you, pressure you, or punish you for it. Pay attention to that. It is the clearest sign you will ever get that you need to get away from that person immediately. And for anyone, but especially for young people who are building relationships online, please be careful about how quickly you trust. The speed and intensity of online connections can be a trap. It's okay to slow things down. It's okay to keep conversations online for a long time before meeting in person. And when you do meet, do it in a public place. Tell multiple people where you're going and who you're with, and have a way to leave on your own if you feel uncomfortable. Never let someone isolate you. This story is also a brutal reminder for parents. We have to be involved in our kids' online lives. And that doesn't mean just spying on them. It means having open, honest, and sometimes awkward conversations about who they're talking to. Talk to them about the dangers of adults who seek out friendships with minors, the risks of sharing personal information, and the reality that people online are not always who they say they are. Bianca's mom trusted Brandon, and from the outside, he seemed like a good guy. It shows just how deceptive these situations can be. Ultimately, the heartbreaking lesson from Bianca's story is about the devastating intersection of mental health struggles, online obsession, and real-world violence. It's a reminder that the dangers that begin on a screen can all too easily spill out into reality with deadly consequences. If you or anyone you know is in a relationship that feels controlling, obsessive, or makes you feel unsafe, whether it's online or in person, please know that there is help available. You are not alone. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. They have trained advocates available 24/7 who can talk to you confidentially. You can also text START to 88788 or visit their website at thehotline.org if you can't safely make a call. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Your safety is what matters most.